If everyone's ready, I'll get started. So good morning, everyone. My name is Caroline LeBlanc. I'm a nursing student here at Southeastern, and this is my honors thesis presentation entitled An Exploration of Stress Among Nursing Students, a Qualitative Study Assessing Stress, Coping, and Quality of Life. So first of all, why did I pick this topic? So I picked this topic because I am a nursing student myself, and even before I started my education, I had always heard that nursing school was so stressful, and it's like stressful in a different way from other degree programs. And I always wondered why that was. Obviously the academics is difficult, but what else is there that's difficult? So that was the first question. So why is nursing school so stressful? Second question is, are the other students in my class experiencing the same thing? How are my peers doing with this? And is it different than the way I'm experiencing it? Are the coping mechanisms different? Things like that. And finally, just honestly, am I alone in this? Am I alone in feeling overwhelmed, stressed, and scared sometimes with the curriculum and what we have to do in nursing school? So when I reviewed the literature on this topic, I found that there was a lack of qualitative studies about nursing students' perspectives regarding their stressful experiences during nursing school. There are a lot of quantitative talking about the prevalence of stress, but not so much about the students' their students' experiences from their own words. So significance to nursing. So why is this important? So when in our textbooks, when we're in nursing school, we learn about the nursing shortage. So what exactly is the nursing shortage? So according to the American Association of Colleges of Nursing, in 2010, 40,000 nurses retired, and in 2020, 80,000 nurses retired. And unfortunately, nursing school enrollment is dropping. So there's not enough new nurses to replace the retiring nurses. And also, this is a topic that is very relevant now with COVID-19 pandemic. We hear about burnout all the time. But burnout is happening prematurely in the career of nurses. So this is a statistics from 2007, where 13% of registered nurses that were new quit their jobs. And then 37% reported a desire to change jobs in 2007. So that you can assume that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, these numbers are even more than they were. And that's a problem for the profession of nursing. So I designed a project to answer these questions with the purposes of identifying stressors that nursing students experience, how those stressors impact students' qualities of life, identify the coping mechanisms that students use to deal with stress, and then how effective these coping mechanisms are. And my research questions are similar. So what stressors nursing students encounter, how these stressors impact their quality of life, what coping mechanisms do they use, and how effective these are. So to construct this project, I used a nursing theorist's model, Newman Systems model, which was designed by Betty Newman. And she was a nursing theorist that saw the patient, the person, as an open system with the environment. So there's a give and take of energy between that patient and the environment. And because we're an open system with energy exchange, we need protection around us. So that's what these circles are around. There's lines of resistance, a normal line of defense, and a flexible line of defense, which I'll get into later, but those are protection measures. So I wanted to view the nursing students as the system and then assess how strong their lines of defense were. And if the stressors from nursing school penetrated those lines of defense to cause issues, illness, symptomology, but also what were the stressors of nursing school? Newman had different classifications for the stressors, so I wanted to kind of classify them in her classification system as well. So here's some definitions. I'll briefly go over a few of them that are important. So flexible line of defense, so that was the outer circle, and it's a protective mechanism that surrounds the system and protects the normal line of defense. So the flexible line of defense is like an accordion structure. So I guess you could think of it kind of as like the skin of a human. They interact with all of the stressors directly, and it waxes and wanes depending on how much energy is being exchanged between the person and the environment. Then the normal line of defense is the client or the patient's normal level of health. So at any given time, it's their health status. And then lines of resistance are protection measures that activate when stressors penetrate that normal line of defense. So that could be like your immune system if you want to think about it in a physical sense, but also coping mechanisms. When we're exposed to a lot of stress, how do we cope with that? How does our body respond? And the two stressors that she identified were intrapersonal stressors, which occur within the system, and then interpersonal stressors, which come from an outside source, but it's proximal, so it's close by. So, doing a literature review, I've classified my literature review into 4 different sections. We have the prevalence of stress in nursing students, and most of the designs of those studies were quantitative. Then we have nursing school, which is just what parts of nursing school are stressful. And that had a little bit more of a mix. We have a quantitative study, cross-sectional study, and a qualitative study. And then coping mechanisms, so how did the nursing students cope with these stresses that they were experiencing? They both were qualitative. And finally, I found one article that talked about the consequences of prolonged stress on these students. So it can cause mental health issues, things like that. And that was a logistic regression analysis. So methodology here. So I wanted to conduct a qualitative study. And qualitative studies in their nature clarify a human experience. I wanted to be able to see what these nursing students were experiencing from their own words. And the tradition used was phenomenology. And like the name states, it's a study of a phenomenon or a lived experience. So the rationale for using both of these together is discovering the lived experience of nursing students. So here's sampling and setting. So in order to recruit participants to my study, I used a recruitment email sent out by Dr. Tillman, and then convenient sampling. So the participant would reach out to me when they wanted to participate, and then from then, I would use snowball sampling. So I would say, if you have any other people that would be interested in my study, please let them know, and we can set up a date and time. Next, we have the setting. So the setting is Southeastern Louisiana University's School of Nursing. So we have 5 semesters of curriculum, 1st through 5th semester, and we have 2 locations. So we have one in Hammond, that's 1st and 2nd semester, and the one here that we're in right now, which is 3rd through 5th. So because of that separation, I decided to use virtual interviews just so it would be easier for us to all work together, because I'm here in Baton Rouge, some people are in Hammond. So we also have different types of programs. We have the normal program, and then there's an accelerated program, which is our program, but you can do it a little bit faster. It's a little bit more intense, and the curriculum's given faster. And usually you go to school during the summer and things like that. One of our other programs we have is the Licensed Practical Nurse to Bachelor of Science in Nursing, or LPN to BSN. So those are just some of the programs that we have here. And my goal here was saturation. So in qualitative data, saturation is when you get to the point of redundancy. So when you get all the data that you're pretty much going to get from your participants, and I reached saturation around interview 5. And I had 8 participants from various semesters. All right, ethical considerations. So because my study included human subjects, I had to get Institutional Review Board approval, and I received that May 12th of 2021 via an expedited review. And because nursing students, or students in general, are a vulnerable population, I had to put some protection measures in place. So of course, confidentiality. The interviews were only accessible to me and the participant, and anytime I would record the interview just for transcription afterwards, but once that transcription was done, I would remove their identity. So I would replace it with like participant 1, participant 2, things like that. And then finally they had to sign an informed consent. So just letting them know that they can withdraw from the study at any time. And if they were uncomfortable with the question that I asked, they didn't have to answer it. And also I contacted the University Counseling Center just so I could have a contact information, like just someone's name that I could give the student if they started to experience some type of adverse reaction to talking about these stressful situations. All right, so here's my procedure, kind of the timeline of this whole project. So this all started in spring 2020. The topic was selected in my timeline with my benchmarks for when I would finish certain things were set. Fall 2020, methodology was selected, and I met with Dr. Prude, my thesis director, and literature review was started. Then spring 2021, the nursing student stress inventory, which was the interview guide that I developed, I created, and then got IRB approval. Fall 2021, interviews were conducted and transcribed, and spring 2022, data analyzed, and my thesis was constructed. So procedure continued. So I handed out my interview guide, and that I entitled Nursing Student Stress Inventory. So I used Newman Systems Theory to conduct these questions because I wanted to know what these students were experiencing, the stressors they were experiencing, also what their lines of defense were, so their coping mechanisms, how strong they were, and also their environment, how what stresses are outside of themselves, what stresses are inside of themselves. And it's a semi-structured interview guide, so it was very much open for discussion. So that was a guide that I would make sure that we stayed on track, but it was open for discussion and we could go here and there from wherever the student wanted to go with it. And from that, when I developed that, Dr. Prude helped me out, made sure that it was reliable and trustworthy so that we were measuring what we wanted to measure. So the interviews themselves were 15 to 40 minutes each, and I conducted them over about a month and a half. So afterwards, I transcribed the interviews verbatim, and as I transcribed the interviews, data analysis was ongoing, and that's a common thing in qualitative data or qualitative research. So the themes began to emerge from there. All right, so data analysis methods. So like I said, I transcribed the interviews and I read those transcripts a ton of times. And after doing that, I employed Kalazi's method of data analysis, which is a trustworthy method of data analysis that is very common in qualitative data. And it developed a thematic map, which I'll show in a couple slides. And then I conducted member checking. So I would take my analysis and I would go back to the participants and say, is this what you meant when you said this? And if they agreed, they would tell me yes. If they didn't, they told me no. But everyone I contacted agreed with my analysis. All right, so these are some demographic findings of my participants. So there were 8 participants and the average age was about 23 and a half. Then most of them were female. I had 2 males and 1 participant identified as non-binary gender fluid. Then semester-wise, half of them were first semester. I had 3rd semester after that, and then 2nd and 5th both had 1 participant and none from 4th semester. And then finally I asked about the accelerated program. So most of them were not in the accelerated program, a few were, and then 1 was an LP and a BSN student. All right, so this is the thematic map. This is just a sample of what I did. So in Kalazi's method, you take significant statements, which are like the quotes directly from the participant, and then I would take formulated meaning. So I would say, this is what I think they meant when they said that, and I'd put that in that column. And then once you start to compare what the participants said, themes would start to emerge. You'd start to see that, like for example, right here, faculty pressure expectations, there's commonalities among both in the same interview and among the participants, so then you could start to cluster the themes and get truly what was going on here. All right, so my first theme that emerged was culture of nursing school. So the culture of nursing school. So this is all about what makes nursing school so unique. Why is it so stressful? And one of the participants kind of highlighted the academic rigor part of it. So they said you actually have to plan to study, and that's something I had to learn. Nursing school is completely different from high school or even general education classes because you have to spend so much time studying. And a lot of students felt blindsided by that. They weren't expecting that before they got in the program. So that was a significant stressor for them. And then we also have different ways to assess our knowledge. So we not only have to know theoretical knowledge, we have to apply that knowledge. And one way we assess this is with return demonstrations. So return demonstrations, briefly, are just the teacher will show us something, a skill, so like taking blood pressure. And then we as a student have to return that skill to them and we're graded on it. And that is a very unique aspect of nursing school that not many other degree programs have. And that was extremely stressful for a lot of people. And this participant said, just being watched pretty much. We're all in the same place in school, but this is not only my teacher, this is a nurse who's been doing nursing for decades. So it is intimidating because this teacher that we have a unique relationship with them because we're with them so much of the time. In clinical, we're there with them like 8 hours, two days a week. And then also we have labs, which can be 3 hours. So we have a unique relationship with our professors that many other degree programs don't have. And they know what they're talking about and we don't. So it's that kind of imbalance of power there is intimidating and causes a lot of stress for a lot of people. So my second theme was nursing school as a lifestyle. So truly, nursing school becomes your lifestyle when you start it. And this quote here kind of highlights how nursing school changed the way that their entire life was structured. So they said, I can't really read now because I have so much stuff. And then going out to eat with my friends, I used to love doing that. And I used to love walking around LSU Lakes in Baton Rouge, but I don't do that much anymore. So you lose a lot of stuff when you're in nursing school because your friends, you don't have time to be with your friends because you're studying so much. Finances are changed because you're studying so much. Like, you really have to start structuring your life around nursing school. So from this theme, 2 sub-themes emerge, with the first one being personal life altered. So this is all about interpersonal relationships, how that person's life and relationships were altered by nursing school. So this participant here is speaking about how their social life was really affected, and also their mood was very affected. So yeah, I kind of just gave up on having a social life at this point. So now it's just like an impending doom. We're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. So I can't really enjoy anything right now. So they're pretty affected by what they're going through, both emotionally, but also physically, with not being able to see their friends. And that can be very stressful and sad for a lot of students, because college, you hear, is supposed to be all about fun and socializing, but that's just not the case for us. The second sub-theme was fear of failure. So in the nursing program, we're given limited chances to succeed because it is a very high stakes job that we're entering. So, we're dealing with people's lives, which is understandable. But that pressure of having to be on your A game all the time was very stressful for a lot of students. So one thing that came up was that a lot of students don't feel like they need to take a break, that they have to keep studying all the time or they're going to fail. So this student was speaking about that, saying when they took a break or when they took time for self-care, I ended up feeling guilty, like I wasted 3 hours. I could have been practicing for this and studying for this. It just feels like a waste every time, even if I'm exhausted and I'm not retaining any information. But if I stop studying, I feel really, really guilty. So that emerges, and really it is counterproductive because research says you need to take a break, but that's just not how these students felt. They would start to feel guilt, and it really overtook a lot of their mental health and their thought processes. So the final theme that emerged was the coping mechanisms. So here are just a few coping mechanisms that were identified. You have playing with pets, walking, dancing, exercising, things like that to help get you away from the just your schoolwork and everything. Sports, video games, being on the phone, computer, things like that. Meditation was one. And finally, being outside. That was a very common one. People just love to either study outside, go for a walk outside, just that fresh air really helped them. But one coping mechanism that emerged that was kind of surprising was crying. So many students spoke about how they cried so much, and honestly, me too. I have as well. So that was kind of concerning though, because this was a very common coping mechanism. So this student said, I know it sounds messed up, but I scheduled a time during the day where I cried for like 10 minutes. And it's upsetting to think about, that you're spending so much time crying, but that pressure and that stress builds up so much that you don't know what to do with it. So it's just cathartic to get it out that way. So that's the only way they felt that they could get out all that pressure. So from this theme, 2 sub-themes emerged as well. So first is misery loves company. So this is all about nursing students' relationships with each other. We truly are like a family because no one else in this world knows what you're going through, like your friend in your class with you. So this student here spoke about how they were very much in a family kind of environment with their clinical group, but they had to stay behind the semester because they failed a class. So losing that was extremely stressful. So they said, we meshed really well. There were like 6 of us. We got really close and they went on and I couldn't. And that was a huge stressor for me, losing a sense of family because they were moving on. We were all we had. Misery loves company. Because no one else, really, your family, your partner, your spouse, they don't know what you're going through. And the importance of your peers was just vital for a lot of these students. The next sub-theme is light at the end of the tunnel. So this is about motivation. So why are we going through this? What is the goal here? And the students were saying that if they thought about how nursing school, the end goal is to be a nurse. And that was their motivation to push through all of this. So almost every student talked about this. And I asked the student if they were satisfied with their life and why. And they said, yeah, I'm pretty satisfied. And I know that's going to lead to something a lot better. And it's being nursing school is going to lead to a hopefully fruitful career and a satisfying career. So that motivating factor is what kept them going, keeps them going, because it is a lot. You're in the trenches when you're in nursing school. You got to keep going, so much studying, so much of your life are given up outside of nursing school. But nursing is a great career that has a lot of options for anyone that decides to become a nurse. So discussion. So we'll go back to the culture of nursing school. So the faculty relationship. So I found a study that was conducted in Japan, and it was on objectively measuring heart variability in their nursing students during a simulation exercise. So they were caring for like a simulated patient. And these researchers divided up the simulation into different phases. So one of those phases was afterwards, like after the simulation, when they were talking to their instructor. And it showed that they were actually most stressed when they were talking to their instructor, even, despite actually working on their patient. But I think what needs to change is that faculty-student relationship is so important, because these are nurses that know how to do everything, that know different techniques that we don't know, that can teach us so many things, that relationship there can strengthen lines of defense, going back to Newman Systems model, because we have that arsenal of skills before we enter the workforce. So when we see a stressor in our career, we know how to deal with it. So that fostering that relationship is just so important, because there's so much richness there, and open lines of communication are very important between faculty and nursing students. Next, academic rigor. So many studies in the literature talked about how that academic rigor was probably one of the most stressful things the nursing students experienced. So I identified that academic rigor was an interpersonal stressor that actually was penetrating the lines of defense. So when you penetrate lines of defense, you start getting symptomology. So shaking, high blood pressure, high heart rate, insomnia, things like that. That shows that academic rigor is really affecting these students on a physical and emotional level. Finally, next, nursing school is a lifestyle. So one article I found was talking about how female nursing students who dedicate all of their time to studying, or most of their time to studying, actually had more of a risk of developing depression and anxiety. So even though we all want to work because we think that's what we have to do to be successful, it's actually going to hurt us in the end. So finding that work-life balance is key, because that work-life balance is what allows you to heal from that stress. The stress is always going to be there, it's not going away. But if we give ourselves time to heal, our lines of resistance, going back to the model, lines of defense, are going to be able to be stronger. So we're able to deal with that in a lot more effective way. And fear of failure. So going back to the fear of failure, that kind of suggests that these students have a little bit of a low self-esteem, because they don't feel like they can control the fact that they're going to fail. They think that failure is just imminent, like, I'm just going to fail because it's so hard. But really, they have control over that. So fostering that self-esteem is extremely important, both for just health in general, but also to be successful in nursing school. So making sure to foster and support these students with low self-esteem and improving that is really important. And so that kind of suggests that there's intrapersonal stressors. So inside of oneself, you're already hearing like, I'm not good enough. I'm guilty because I'm not doing this right. So that on top of the interpersonal stressors from actually the academics and the hard parts of nursing school, it's just fighting against each other. So it's not good. And then coping mechanisms. So a lot of articles talked about a lack of education, and one in particular that was conducted in Peru was talking about how the students lacked the knowledge of coping mechanisms to reduce physical signs of stress. So that would be like deep breathing, going for a walk, like things like that. They just lacked education, and I saw that too in my data. A lot of students didn't talk about that. It's just crying, avoiding, things like that, but nothing really productive to hone our skills to be able to deal with more stress in the future. So it strengthens your lines of resistance and resilience if you're able to develop that. And here's a support system. And almost all the articles, that was one of the main things that these nursing students talked about as being their source of comfort. And same in my study, it's just the family. It's a very unique part of nursing school where you're gonna remember these people for the rest of your life, because you went through something, not traumatic necessarily, but very stressful together. And you have that commonality there. And motivation. So one article I found that was interesting is they found that nursing students that entered nursing voluntarily, not from their parents, but also wanted to enter nursing to help people, were more likely to be academically motivated to finish their degree. And that every single one of my participants said that they wanted to help people. That's why they wanted to be a nurse. And that they just that was what was pushing them through. And like I said, the light at the end of the tunnel, that's what they're thinking about. So I think that's a very positive thing in the population that I studied, is they're doing this because they want to, and that's why they're continuing. And that motivation is what pushes them through the trenches and the difficult times. So we'll talk about some limitations. So I did have mostly female participants. And nursing, the profession of nursing and nursing school in general is mostly female, but that male perspective is extremely important as well. Not all the semesters were represented. So I had mostly first semester, but fourth semester was not represented in this study. There was a small sample size of 8 participants, but I did reach saturation at interview 5, but it would contribute to the richness of the data if I had more participants. One university setting, so I only did it at our university. And qualitative data in general is, there's a lack of generalizability there just because it is a personal human experience. So I couldn't take the data that I have here and contribute or kind of apply it to even other schools in the city, state, country. Like, it's just not how qualitative data really is designed. So recommendations. So we need more quantitative data, just to know the prevalence of stress in nursing students, but also how is the stress impacting the body? Like, objectively, how is this prolonged exposure to stress impacting both mental health and physical health? Then we need to explore measures to improve stress management education. So whether that be a course in our curriculum or even just incorporating that into clinical education, that is vital so that we have these skills before we enter the nursing field, so that we don't get burned out. Like, we don't want to not be a nurse before we even start. And then we need to explore ways to improve faculty-student relationships, because like I said, that connection is so vital, because there's so much there, so much richness there, that there can be an open line of communication and a great relationship. And fostering an open environment is just extremely important. And then I would like to compare the stress between accelerated students and non-accelerated students, because I'm curious if there's a difference. I think there is, but I'm curious to see if that is the case. So here are my references. I have quite a few. And I wanted to end on this quote from a 5th semester student. So they said, when I asked if they were satisfied with their life, they said, "I think I'm really satisfied because I'm so close to graduating and everything's going well. I like to help people and I have to see this through." So thank you so much for listening, and please let me know if you have any questions. Anyone have any questions?
Let's see. Hold on. Dr. Tillman, if you want to go ahead.
Well, Caroline, I first want to say how excited I am that you have made it to this point, and it's been an awesome experience to hear you present. As the department head of nursing, it's also been somewhat of a humbling experience, because I know that you talk to our students, and that's what your study is based on. And so I personally find a lot of value and insight. I know it's not generalizable to all of our students, it's only the students that participated in your study. But I think there are things that we as educators can take away from it and learn from it. And it's interesting because we've been having some conversations about the culture of the program and how can we improve it. And so this isn't, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but since you're here and you talk to these 8 students, I'm going to take advantage of your insight. But how do you feel we could change the culture? What are some concrete things that you feel we could do as faculty to make the culture more supportive? I know in your recommendations, I believe you mentioned having a course where we talk about managing stress and developing coping skills. And we as faculty have had that conversation. This board, Lon and I, especially, we've talked about that and how that maybe needs to be integrated into a first semester course like Nursing 333. but are there other things that you would just recommend based on your experience with these 8 students?
Yeah, and this is also from personal experience. Whenever we would do like simulations or anything like that, a lot of times our reflection of that would just be written on paper. But I think we need to take a second or a little while to talk with each other. Like I interact with the instructor and my peers interact, and we talk about constructively what everyone did well, what everyone needed to improve on, and what everyone can improve on as a whole. Because I think that exposure to that is very important in being able to deal with what we're going to see in the clinical setting, but also being able to deal with constructive criticism, because it's not that you're personally trying to hurt us, but a lot of students do feel like that faculty, critiques are personal attacks, and it's not. So I think if that reflection period with faculty and students is extremely important. So I think that needs to be expanded a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great insight. And I believe with simulations, we build in a debriefing period. I believe that I've observed informal debriefing in the hallways because I sometimes will encounter groups of students sitting on a bench up on the 2nd floor, and they're in their scrubs, so I know they had a return that day, and they will be talking about it with one another. So I think it happens maybe student to student in an informal way, but formalizing that's a great idea, definitely. And then how do you, I don't know how to phrase this, but do you think that we as faculty could somehow encourage, facilitate students forming relationships? Because I know personally for me, that was one of the things that got me through my nursing program a long time ago, and I hear it over and over from students when they talk about struggling in a course like pathopharmacology. Many of them who are successful will tell me, well, I got through it because I had a study group or a group of peers and we got together. Is there something you feel we could do to facilitate the formation of those groups, support groups, early on in the program?
This is kind of just an idea, but this is more of a clinical application. But I remember in my clinical education, my instructor one day had us partner up with another person, so we had to do the whole clinical day with that person. So I'm not saying necessarily like partner people up together, kind of like a seating chart, but if that student or a student had that person that they could just go to in a class, where like maybe you even form your own study groups in the class. Like I know that we do group projects, but a lot of times you only interact because of the group project. So I think if maybe we had days in class even where we could study together, go over questions together, and exchange phone numbers, like facilitating that exchanging of a phone number is extremely important, because that's how they're going to contact. They know the name, they know the number, they can contact that person. So I think honestly, even just having a forum where we give contact information is extremely important. That happened in one of my classes this semester. It was very helpful because you know the face, the name, and the number. So if you have any questions, you'd be like, hey, so-and-so, are you experiencing the same thing I am? I think that is also extremely important.
Do you feel that that's easier to do in an in-person class setting
Yes.
than an online course?
Yes, that's a very good point, because those online classes are hard. Just because you don't meet face-to-face, you don't see the peers that you're working with. Like honestly, in some of my group projects this semester, I didn't even know who these people were until we came and did our presentation. And I think if I would have been able to meet them in person first and maybe have brainstorming sessions in person, it would have been a lot easier to facilitate productivity in that group setting.
Do you feel that in first semester it would be best to have
Yes.
more face-to-face interaction
Definitely.
in all of your classes
Yeah.
versus an online class in first semester?
Yes. Because it is so unfamiliar, and being a first semester nursing student is just insane because you're being thrown, all the stuff is being thrown. But I know even I enjoy things like skills blitz, where we were just able to come together and I would meet these people and we could do these skills together. Just more of that, I think, would be helpful, just so you can put faces to names.
Good insight.
Any other questions from anybody?
Caroline, I know a lot of students are in class and couldn't, participate in your presentation today, but I would like to get with you after this to see if we might be able to print out your PowerPoints or do some type of poster presentation that we could actually post here in Hammond and also in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, of course.
And in part to brag about you for completely going through the process, because we're trying to recruit, more honors students to remain in the honors curriculum in nursing. So I want to use you as a role model.
Yeah, and I'm willing to be a
I think one way
contact.
of doing that is
Yeah.
is doing a poster of your thesis and or a bulletin board or something and presenting it that way to students.
Yeah, and I'm even willing to give out my contact information, like even when I'm, an actual nurse, which is crazy to think about. But I would be so willing to talk to these students, or even come back to campus and talk to students that want to go into the honors program, because this has been so formative for me. This has been awesome. It's truly something that I did. I'm very proud of it, and I think it really enhanced my whole college experience, and I'm going to remember this forever. So I would love to help recruit more students to do this.
Well, thank you. We will, from this point on, set up a group meeting. It may be virtual, but we'll have you as part of that when we meet with the honor students in the first semester.
Yes, I
I
would
was
love that.
even thinking maybe this fall, the health sciences LLCs do guest speakers. It would be wonderful to have you come do this with them. If you would not be, we'll arrange a time that meets your schedule, but yeah, look for an email.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions if they don't care.
Ken, I don't know if Caroline would be interested, but I always thought it might be good for her to present this to faculty even.
I would second that, because I know Sue and I, just working with her throughout this project, as a faculty, it was very enlightening for me to really reflect on my role for students in nursing. And having been a student in a this particular nursing program, but then now being on the other side of it, it has certainly made me self-reflect on how I can be a better contributor.
Yeah.
Well, we have an opening on May 13th. I don't know what your schedule is like.
She's gonna be getting ready for
Yeah,
graduation.
the day before graduation.
I would love to have you come to our faculty meeting though and present and again to be recognized in front of the nursing faculty. If you would be willing to do that, so give it some thought. You don't have to answer right now, but give it some thought and let me know. Okay.
Okay, I will.
Or maybe even in the fall.
Yeah.
If,
Yeah.
Thank you, Maddie.
Is there any, Maddie said, great job. Was
Thank
there
you.
another comment on here? Awesome. Anybody else on the call have any questions? No, okay. Do you wanna go?
Yeah, do you mind if I ask a couple of
Of
questions?
course.
There are a few things I want to know. And the first thing I will say is, I teach the research methods course for COM, and I would kill for one of my students to have that kind of profound understanding of qualitative methodology, seriously.
Thank
From the understanding, not just, hey, I was convenient sampling and I needed IRB approval, to the, hey, I have an instrument and I understand its limits. The questions don't pick on your dependent variable. By that I mean you let them speak in their own words, to understanding the importance of transcription, to knowing that you need to go back through with a methodology once you have the data to sort of, not just here's what I saw, but I had this systematic approach to pulling out and examining these themes, to the going back to the community with a member check. Really, really just better than master's level understanding of what qualitative methodology is supposed to be. So I'm exceedingly pleased with that. That's wonderful. Question-wise, a couple of things occurred to me. One was, you took people from different points in the program. Did you compare their answers across those things? Is there a difference in how they express their stress and how they cope with it early versus as you see them late?
Yeah, so informally kind of I would do that. And even just comparing like the 5th semester student to the 1st semester student, it's just that stress, you kind of get used to it.
Mhm.
So the stress level, when I would talk about physical effects of stress or how often you feel stressed, was much higher in the first semester and much lower as you went down, because it's honestly just you're getting used to it. And I could, from my own personal experience, I could say the same thing. It just becomes part of the routine.
That would be, for me, a suggestion for future study is you and other people behind you come sort of, you've laid some groundwork here about, we experience these stressors, to sort of begin to tease out. First semester stress may be very different because you really do have a fear of failure. I don't know how much harder this is going to be. So that might be, and then the kind of as you go, that would be an interesting future study for me. I want to push on your idea that this I'm going to fail is driven by low self-esteem. These are students who have excelled compared to your contemporaries. You wouldn't have been admitted to nursing school had you not been better than they were. These are students with tremendous grades, not just in the immediate prior to coming to nursing school, but all throughout high school. You don't end up here without a lot of somebody in your corner and a lot of, I question that it's a low self-esteem. Is it possible, and it would be curious to see if you explored it at all with them, that some of it is, there's something fun about it being really hard? That a little bit of the, are you the A student who goes home and says, Mom and Dad, I failed an exam today, and the grade comes back and it's a 92?
Yep.
Right? I wonder to what extent, 'cause I see it with honor students, so I don't know if it's true for nursing students, but there's, I wonder if some of the, I think there's legitimate fear along the way, but if some of it isn't, there's some fun in spinning yourself up about it, that in being so very stressful and it's so hard and I'm so this, it puts a little bit of a light on the accomplishment, right? So
That's true.
I'd be curious to see if you explored that theme with them, if people would, if that's right, if they'd own it, if it's not right, if it's partial.
Yeah, because that's interesting. That is a culture part of it, because we all are high achievers when we get here. And I guess I was kind of thinking, like, when you get to nursing school, it is so difficult that people that never made C's, D's in their lives are making C's and D's, and a lot of people would put their self-worth in their ability to make an A. So that's kind of where the low self-esteem thing came for me, and just, it's not generalizable, I guess, but just that portion of it, they were just so used to doing so well, but now they're not, and now they feel awful, and they feel like a failure. And honestly, from personal experience, that's kind of what happens with me. So that's just kind of, and she said her as well.
A C to a good student is in fact really.
Yes. So that was kind of where I was going with that, but I definitely think that's a good point.
I think there's a lot of perfectionist mentality, and expectations, self, in the students who are in this area. And so, yeah, I think self-image is where they certainly struggle when they're not meeting their perfect expectations.
And I would think that the mantra of this is so important, it's people's lives at stake, probably amps that up even more, right? I'm already a perfectionist, and then the telos, the reason for doing any of this is, if you don't do it right, you're gonna kill somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
that probably adds a layer of stress that is unique to nursing school.
Yeah.
It's different.
And then the other thing that is unique to nursing is that licensure exam at the end.
That's true.
And so much of the rigor that we utilize in our testing as faculty, it's because we know that NCLEX is coming, but it's true. And I meet with students all the time who they, were A and D students, and now they're struggling to make a C, and they feel terrible. And some do internalize it, and I think it affects their self-esteem or their self-image, as Ms. Bordelon said. And then some come to me blaming others, especially faculty, like, it's not me, it's them. So I see two sides of that coin when it comes to grades. One of the things I found interesting, because we're starting to have some conversations about moving away from a GPA-only admission process. We've had it for years, it's worked for years, but the truth is the organization that our accrediting body is part of recently issued a white paper calling on nursing programs to move to a more holistic admissions process. And I believe it was in your discussion, you mentioned, that, students who were motivated to help others were more likely to succeed in nursing school. I would like to get that reference from you specifically, but you know, I have the thought that maybe that is one thing that we should be asking, or how do you think we could ask that or ascertain that from a potential nursing student?
Let me think about that. So, because honestly, there's some students I think that enter nursing because it's difficult. They know the program itself is difficult. So, I don't know, and honestly, it's been so long since I applied to nursing school. I think is there a questionnaire on it? I can't remember, honestly. No.
There's questions, but it's more demographic.
Yeah, then.
Because the decision ultimately is on your cumulative GPA and all of the required prerequisite courses, and we literally rank everyone and take, you know, if we have, 72 seats or 84 seats, whatever we have, we take the top GPAs, and that's it. But, I know as a faculty member that we can have a student who's making C's and struggling to pass a didactic class, but they are phenomenal in the clinical setting. And we can have a student with a 4.0 who they're terrible in the clinical setting. They lack empathy sometimes. They can't connect with patients, and we know that for patients, it's not what we do, but it's how we make them feel.
Exactly.
And some of our higher GPA students lack the ability to form that connection with patients, and also to put things together and use critical judgment in the clinical setting. But they can ace that test. So, as faculty, we want students who can, in the clinical setting, make the connection with patients, utilize clinical judgment. We want them to pass our courses and ultimately pass the licensure exam on the first attempt. And so looking at the admissions process, it's like, what is the magic formula? And how do we get all of that? And, we know it moves beyond GPA. And I think our emphasis on GPA only creates some of this stress for nursing majors before they ever even get into clinical, because it is competitive based on GPA.
The question that you asked, what did the question naturally arise in conversations with these students about what drove them to be a nurse?
Yes.
I was gonna say, because it's not on this inventory, but it seems like it was a naturally evolving question.
It was. And I think even just asking that question in the admission process could possibly be helpful, just to get a background. I don't know if that's too invasive, but just not a discussion question, but just write out why, because these students would start talking about that and they get so passionate and more
That's what I was gonna say.
engaged.
Did their demeanor change in the interview when they went from you asking these specific questions to what's their motivating factor?
Because I strategically placed it at the end of the interview, and their moods just lightened up. We're talking about all this horrible stuff, but now they're like, that's where all of the positivity would come in, which was very pleasing and promising to see, because they do want to do this. It's not like it's so awful that they don't want to do it. No one's forcing them to do it. This is why they're doing it. So that just kind of naturally came up in the first interview. I was like, well, let me just ask that.
That's really interesting. It's interesting that it naturally came up, but was consistent. Like their responses were consistent.
Almost the same,
that there was some driving factor to help and care for others. And now it makes me wonder, just when we talk about things to continue motivation or support students, maybe that's something that as faculty we latch onto that, and how can we latch onto that and let that be the supporting or coping mechanism for them? Continue reminding them of why you're here doing this.
It's almost like a vision board or something, like just a physical reminder of this is what you're going to get, and just Yeah.
make the light at the end of the tunnel a
Visual, yeah.
tangible thing instead of just that abstract.
Yeah.
Or even just the occasional switch in language. I know we were talking at an academic affairs meeting about math has kind of banned in their lower level math, saying you should have learned this in high school because they've found it's a real trigger and it shuts kids down. Even if it's true, you just don't say it to them. It makes them feel like they can't do it. So even if where you're tempted to say sort of the high stressor things, you won't pass the exam or you won't, you'll kill somebody, but to sort of say, oh, and just think how helpful you'll be able to be to a patient with
Yes.
this kind of thing,
Yeah.
like doing the positive framing on the motivator rather than that might just be just a little thing that could pick in.
Yeah.
Mental trick.
Yeah. It's intriguing.
Do you have a question?
I had a kind of a question and comment about the way the grades affect stress in school, because not only are we worried about passing all our classes so that we can continue and graduate, but also like especially because nursing students are very high achieving, a lot of us came into college with like the priority scholarship, that if you drop below a 3.0
That's a
in a
good point.
semester, you lose, and that pays for like the majority of my schooling.
Mm-hmm.
So like the fear of losing that because, oh no, my GPA dropped because it's my first semester of nursing school and I made a couple of C's.
That's a good
It's-
point.
That's an extra level of stress that the number of times I've told someone I wish we were just only allowed to make A's or B's with a 10-point scale. Because a 79 is the lowest we can pass with a 7-point scale. Like I would take an 80 being the lowest if my GPA would come
That's true, because it is a different grading scale. 7
And going
points
from that 10 point to that 7 point
is a huge
it's
shell
like,
shock.
I made 85. Oh wait, that's a C.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I definitely recognize coming here is the perceptions. There's a very different perception or like maybe lack of perception even of what they believe is going to occur versus what actually occurs. And I do think that there's got to be some way that we can try to bridge that gap, because it does end up being almost a culture shock that there's this belief of what I'm going to expect versus what reality is when I get in, and it can be extremely overwhelming for
Yeah.
students.
Yeah, because there's like, even just like culturally, there's a lot of changes, because we go from not like making our schedules every semester to here's your schedule.
That's true. It's a lot more
Yeah, it's-
structured.
It's
Yeah.
a lot of things that like all of a sudden we lose control of all these little things that we didn't even like think about.
Yeah.
But like making our own schedule so we could plan our work schedule around it.
Yeah.
And all of a
That
sudden it's like, oh,
exactly.
and there's just a lot of little things like that throughout that you're like, oh god.
Yeah. Definitely.
What would be, I guess, in y'all's position, what do you think could be done to help bridge that? A course prior to nursing, like a course prior to the nursing, a meeting, more information about the program.
A
or
student to
Definitely.
student confound.
Being transparent from the get-go, I
Yeah,
think is
like
very
from like
important.
SE 101, like
If you're gonna, like, as you know, in SE 101, they try to kind of weed you out a little bit.
yeah,
They're
and they
like,
put us in one that was almost all
Yes.
nursing and health sciences.
yeah, and it was like, here's some other options.
So
If
does
you're-
anyone in SE 101 from nursing come and speak?
No. Not that I remember. And even like that student to student thing like she was talking about, or someone mentioned, it's just, you need someone to be real with you, because it is, honestly, I could say that, oh, nursing school, it was hard, but you know, it's okay, because I'm at the end. Like, I don't have all that stuff to do.
I wish
But if I
someone in
asked you
second
that,
semester, I wish someone
Yeah.
in second semester would have come and talked to us in freshman year and been like,
Yeah.
look,
I'd be like, if you
They're-
want, you gotta dedicate yourself
Second
to
or
this.
third
They are
semester, 'cause
doing
they're still in the
this
middle of it.
with the LLCs, the honors one is doing it, and so is the health sciences one. So it might be worth inviting all of the nursing majors to come to this. A lot of times it's a Google Meet virtual thing, even the one that was the panel they did in the Student Union Theater.
Mhm.
Y'all might be able to say, hey, do you think you're in nursing? Come.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm sure they would
Well,
love
And
to
I
actually
will
see
say,
that.
I am a big believer, I'm like, y'all just give us a 10-point scale and told us we can only make A's and B's. I'm like, I will take having 1 less percent of wiggle room.
Yeah. And
That's
I
interesting
understand.
feedback as well.
Yeah, I understand this. I understand the grading scale. I do, because, like we talked about, it is kind of important, like that we
It's very
know what
important.
we're talking about. But it is very hard. It doesn't mean that it's not extremely difficult, because we've had a 10-point scale high school and college, so it's like it's a shell shock when, like you said, you get an 85, you're like, oh, it's a big, no, it's a C. Like, it's just, it is really difficult to deal with.
It's a mind game thing, I think, for lack of a better term. It's a mind game.
Yeah, and so far through nursing school, I've always had a non-nursing class as well. I've always had a psych course because I'm finishing up my minor. And so I look at like that class's grades and I look at my nursing grades and I have to remember that the scales are different.
Yeah, and that is difficult. But I mean, I do understand it's a necessary evil, kind of, so.
I get that it's necessary. That's why I think like you can't make anything less than an 80 would be fair enough.
Yeah.
Just because right now you can't make anything less than a 79.
Yeah,
That's
that's
the
true.
lowest.
Hey, great discussion about SE 101. I happen to have a meeting next week with people from the Center for Student Excellence, and I will bring this up. I was invited I think it was in the fall, to speak to the SE 101 class that the Nursing and Health Sciences LLC students are in. But I would love that opportunity, and I think some of our faculty would, to go to more of the SE 101 courses and speak and communicate some of these things that students can anticipate. So thank you for bringing that up.
Definitely.
Anyone else?
No.
I know on behalf of myself, I can't express how proud I am of you. Like, I know I've told you that 1,000,001 times, but yeah. I know, I'm super proud of you. I also am so grateful for Dr. Prude, who, when you got to second semester, we were like, hey, because of course you were in my class first semester, and we're like, we're not really sure what to do with this, and Dr. Prude absolutely took not just you, but me under her wing as well, and she has been an amazing mentor, I think, to both of us through this project. And so I do want to tell you, Sue, thank you so much for just stepping up to the plate and taking this beyond what I anticipated when we started this a couple years ago. We couldn't have done it without you.
Clearly done a great
Well,
job.
Caroline made it super easy. She's just amazing. And when I was like, let's do a study, she's like, okay. We could have just done like a lip review and been done with that. But when I suggested, hey, let's actually do, she was like, okay, let's do that. So it was fun. I enjoyed it. It was a great experience for me. And like I said, Caroline made it so easy. And Caroline, I just cannot put into words. I cannot articulate how proud I am of you and how excited I am of you. And you're amazing.
Thank you.
Are you gonna send it out somewhere? Are y'all gonna put it out there? Is there a student journal or an appropriate?
Oh, we're gonna publish.
Excellent.
I have it on my to-do list. I have it Caroline's manuscript. So yeah, we're gonna publish. I have a journal, education journal in mind.
Perfect. That's really great. There are some honors journals too, so if if you don't land the home there, let me know, because there's some spots we can land it to.
Perfect.
Great.
Exciting. Awesome. Thank y'all. Thank everyone for listening. I really appreciate it.
You're so proud. Thank y'all for joining us virtually too.
Caroline,
Minus
you got
the little
paperwork
bubble at the
to do.
beginning.
You got those basics
Yeah.
of
Bye, you guys.